So I was only 8 years old, and I was brought over by my babysitter to stay in her apartment in Placentia. And to me, it was a cool new experience. It was finally being somewhere different. I thought her boyfriend was kind of cool, who lived with her, kind of a badass, maybe a little bit of a redneck, but I couldn't tell. I didn't really have any experience with rednecks at the time. So the reason she would do that is so she could go to work at her other part-time job and leave me there at her apartment. And she trusted me in her apartment. Maybe a mistake, because as soon as she was gone, the first chance I had, I did some snooping. And I went straight to their bedroom, and I went straight to their nightstand. And in that nightstand, I went straight for the top drawer. Simplest thing. Opened it up, jackpot. What's there? A black gun. And I look at it, and I go, oh, how cool. And I reach down, and I begin to pick up the handle. And thankfully, I was intimidated by its weight, and immediately let it set back down, kind of freaked out and backed up, and my story ends there. But unfortunately for some kids, it didn't end there. I was lucky to say that my friend wasn't there with me that day, and maybe we would have gone a little further, played some games, some dare or something, and it could have worked out a little differently. But as easy as it was for me to find that is one of the reasons and one of the examples I'll be going over as to why there should be additional regulation on guns in the US. Specifically on storage and also background checks. So Gun Violence Archive reports that as of yesterday, 12,106 people have been killed this year by gun violence within the US. That's just so far. Speaking of kids that weren't as lucky, back last year, as reported by CBS Miami, there was a family having a barbecue in the Miami area, and one relative decided it was a good chance to take out his AK-47-like assault rifle and show it to another relative. And he did so, but then he casually left it on the table next to the barbecue. And a 6-year-old picked up the AK-47 and shot his grandfather with it. And it did what it was supposed to do. He did not survive. So Gun Violence Archive reports that there are 1,734 accidental shootings so far this year. So pretty simple when it comes to that. I just suggest a policy change in gun storage. Guns should be kept in either safes or somewhere where a child cannot easily reach it, preferably high up or just somewhere where you know that there's accountability. And if someone says their argument is they need quick access to the gun for a home invasion, there are safes that they can make that are thumbprint or fingerprint activated that can be just as quickly opened as a drawer, activated and popped open, and grab a gun to protect your home. So it's pretty simple. Just simply keep it out of reach of children. If those laws had already been in place, then I never would have seen the gun at their apartment, and that kid probably never would have shot his grandfather. So unfortunately, there are still unjust gun deaths that also come from adults who happen to purchase their guns legally in this country. As reported by CNN, the Virginia Tech massacre, which was the biggest mass shooting in our country's history, that killer happened to buy his guns legally. And he did so despite a judge 2 years previously deeming him an imminent danger to himself and due to mental illness. He happened to wound 17 people and kill 32. Now, that's not the only problem with insufficient background checks. There are people who don't have to perform background checks. Private sellers who are unlicensed do not need to do this. And the International Association of Chiefs of Police say that guns are far too easily acquired by prohibited possessors and too often end up being used in gun crime and gun violence. Specifically, people who don't want a background check can acquire a gun if they want. And the New York Times reported with an example, in 2012, a gunman killed 3 people, including his wife, in Wisconsin, who had recently filed a restraining order against him. But he was able to purchase the gun online, and he proceeded to shoot her and 2 others at a spa. Now, according to Guns in America, a national survey on private ownership and the use of firearms via the National Institute of Justice Research, 40% of all firearms that are transferred, bought, and sold in the US are transferred by unlicensed individuals. That means that 40% of the guns out there in this country are owned by people who have not had background checks performed on them. And that's kind of disturbing. Let's be optimistic and say maybe only half of those people are people that shouldn't be owning guns. So if that's cool, oh great, still 20% people out there shouldn't be owning. I don't know, I think 2% is still too high of a number out there. Specifically, that would be in theory like the guy who killed the people in Virginia. He would not have passed the background check if he had been, if he didn't want to go to a mental institution and they forcefully made him go. But that isn't what happened. So he still passed the background check. So that's saying now that there's a 40% amount of people who maybe have been in a mental hospital forcefully and can't own a gun in this country. So this is pretty simple. All I suggest is a policy change that we do much more thorough background checks that can catch information like this that don't get slipped through on the attacker in Virginia Tech. And also universally required background checks. They should be everywhere. If they have to be licensed in order to perform the background check, then so be it. That should work out. But if they can't get the means they need to perform the background check, then they shouldn't be allowed to sell the guns. It's just not right that someone like me, if I committed a crime, when I forfeited those rights to own a gun and other rights as well in this country, that I can go to a gun show if I want, which they're really popular, and just buy a gun, almost any kind of gun. But all the ones that are technically legal, but I'm not legally supposed to have a gun. But it's not traceable, it's not trackable, it's not registered. So let's say that the whole reason that we own guns isn't because it gives us a good feeling, isn't because it feels nice to hold a weapon in our hands, isn't because it feels good to shoot a target and hit a target, and that feeling that it gives us. The reason we own the guns are because we're trying to protect ourselves and protect each other, and it's all about that. So even with all these new laws, let's say the positive effect is very minimal. Let's say that maybe all we do is just save one life. But isn't it high time we say that it's worth it to save that one life, especially when it could be somebody that you know? Thank you. I had to cut out so much. What did you think, man? It was good. I like this because I completely agree with you. Oh yeah, I think you should. Someone performs so quickly because thorough and everything. So that's why I added it. Well, it has to be a thorough background check. That needs to be stricter out of the person because there are some countries that have some governments where you can't California is one of those states where you can't own silencers or automatic firearms. Basically, like California should do right now is they're trying to get rid of
All right, Anna, what did you think?
I thought the introduction was really good with personal experience. He did have a thesis and he had a preview of his main points. And throughout the main points, they did have strong examples, which he cited, all of them. And he had easy solutions, like common sense, keep your guns away from the kids, and you should run a background check on the people who are buying guns, which have to be laws because people don't do it. And his conclusion, he tied everything really well. And he had good eye contact and hand gestures too.
All right. Yeah, I like the personal story at the beginning. I think that pulls us in pretty effectively, and it gives you this sense of credibility ethos that I think is pretty effective at the beginning of the speech. You got a very specific purpose statement, that's good. I thought that there needed to be a clearer preview. It sounded to me like you kind of previewed what the problem was, but not necessarily what the speech was going to consist of. The examples that you had, the two main examples that you then followed up with statistical information on, I thought they were pretty good, although there's a little bit of an issue. For instance, this story about I think the grandfather in Miami who got killed, that wasn't a storage issue, that was a stupidity issue. It's not like the kid did like you did and found the AK-47, in an unsecured place. It was like they're showing it off, sets it down at the table and walks away for a minute. That's just that's a dumbass thing. I'm not sure that the storage law would fix that issue.
I meant to say he also just simply, the guy who relatively pulled it from his room, he didn't even have anywhere. So
Yeah.
he could easily just gone to the room as well and
Yeah.
done the same thing. That's a stupid.
Yeah. Like I said, to me that seems like that's less an issue of somebody didn't do the right kind of storage and more that they were not careful with what they were doing. And there might be ways to address those issues, maybe requiring people to do some kind of safety training or something before they buy weapons. I don't know. That might add more to your argument. Which, by the way, you had a little bit of time on. I heard you saying that you had to cut a whole bunch of stuff out, but you still went 7.5 minutes.
I don't know how I did that.
You had a little bit of time. Well, sometimes your energy level kicks up a little bit. The story about Cho being able to access the guns is because he wasn't involuntarily taken in. How I'm still trying to figure out how did they find out that kind of information? How would anybody discover that in a background check? That's the stuff that I think is missing in the argument. I thought you did a good job talking about all of the places where there aren't background checks required and where transfers could take place between people who aren't really supposed to be accessing guns, that sort of thing. So people who were trying to skirt the issue could get access. And the example of the guy in Wisconsin who killed his wife and she had obtained a restraining order, it wasn't clear whether or not he obtained the gun after the restraining order had been issued, and so he was, he bought it at a gun show, that kind of thing. So, but I think that's the point that you're trying to make. It says, here's somebody, he has a restraining order against him. He would be prohibited in a background check, at least for a period of time, from getting access to a gun, but he was able to go around by going someplace else and accessing the gun. Then I think you've got a good, clear example of the problem, and I think that needed to be explained a little bit more. So I think the solution issue needs to work a little bit more effectively. You need to kind of figure out how these background check sorts of things are supposed to work, because, well, like you said, it's complicated, and I think I think that's one of the problems with that as a solution is that it's a complicated thing. You got a lot of people who are selling guns, and like you said, unlicensed. They're not all crooks. You got people. I got a gun I want to sell. I posted it on eBay. How am I supposed to do a background check on the people on eBay? I can do a check of their seller rating. Or their purchasing rating, 100% reliable. He always pays, but that doesn't tell me that this is a person that I shouldn't be selling my gun to. So, like an explanation about if there was a database that everybody had to go to, or some kind of verification that people had to go through first, maybe that would be a solution to the problem. So, I think you've got a good development of the argument. I think your examples could fit a little bit more accurately, and then maybe work on the solution a bit more. The presentation, as always, I think you did a very good job speaking to us, so you don't have any issues there. All right, thank you.